Our lives are shaped by our priorities. Our time and energy and resources that we have are all limited, so we will inevitably spend them on what is important to us. So in order to make significant changes in our lives, that's going to require us to change our priorities. Well, what should be most important to us? The Bible shows us what our highest priorities ought to be. And we need to see what the Scriptures teach and examine our lives and our priorities to see if we are what we ought to be. So in this video, we're going to notice what the Bible has to say about our highest priorities. Number 1, we are to fear God and keep His commandments. The wise man said, "The conclusion when all has been heard is, fear God and keep His commandments, because this applies to every person." Another translation uses the phrase, "This is the whole duty of man." In other words, fearing and obeying God is all-encompassing. Every part of our lives must be devoted to the Lord and doing what He has instructed us to do. If this is not the overarching principle in our life, we will not be able to please God. Peter told the household of Cornelius, "I most certainly understand now that God is not one to show partiality, but in every nation, the man who fears Him and does what is right is welcome to Him." In order to be welcomed by God, we need to fear Him and obey Him. Number 2, we need to seek His kingdom and His righteousness. Jesus said this in the Sermon on the Mount, "But seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be added to you." Elsewhere, Jesus used a parable to describe the kingdom as a pearl of great value that a merchant obtained by selling all that he had. At the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus spoke of the need for us to hunger and thirst for righteousness. There are many things that fall under the umbrella of His kingdom and His righteousness, including assembling with the saints, praying to God, studying the Bible, and so on. These spiritual activities are a necessary part of seeking His kingdom and His righteousness, and they need to be a priority for us. Number 3, we need to provide for our own. Paul wrote this to Timothy, "But if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever." So as we're consulting the Bible to make this list about what our priorities ought to be, someone might wonder why this would make the list, why this would be a top priority, given the emphasis that the Scriptures place upon spiritual things. However, Paul said in that passage that one who does not provide for his own has denied the faith. Now, this is not condemning one who is unable to work and therefore not able to provide for his family. 2 Thessalonians 3 and verse 10 makes it clear that the condemnation is for those who are unwilling to work. But if one is able to work and provide for his own, then he has a moral obligation to do so. Now, of course, this must be done within the context of fearing God and keeping His commandments and seeking first the kingdom, as we've already talked about. So we cannot work to provide for our families to the neglect of our spiritual well-being or our spiritual responsibilities before God. Yet this needs to be a priority for us if we want to please the Lord. Then number 4, we are to do good to all people. Paul told the Galatians, "So then, while we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, and especially to those who are of the household of faith." James talked about the importance of doing good to others and connected that to our faith. He said, "If a brother or sister is without clothing and in need of daily food, and one of you says to them, 'Go in peace, be warmed and be filled,' and yet you do not give them what is necessary for their body, what use is that? Even so, faith, if it has no works, is dead, being by itself." Now, there are a lot of non-religious people who do good to others, even though they don't believe in God, but they still do good to others. So we need to make sure that as we are doing this, we're doing this within the context of serving God. Helping others does not excuse us from our obligations to the Lord. Furthermore, Paul said that we do this as we have opportunity. implying that we cannot neglect our other priorities that we've already noticed in order to go out and start looking for the good that we can do for others. Those opportunities will present themselves. As you have opportunity, do good to all people, as we continue also to obey the Lord, seek first His kingdom, and provide for our own. So in summary, there are many things that are competing for our attention. So we need to make sure that we understand what is truly important and then shape our lives around fulfilling the purpose God has given us and carrying out His will in our lives.